Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Cold Hard Truth podcast. I'm Shrikar Rajendran.
I'm Jack Smith.
And I'm Anish Gupta.
And in today's episode, we are going to be ranking the recently franchise tag players based on how likely they are to leave in free agency. Of course, the deadline passed where we saw many big names get franchise tagged, and now we just wait and see what the future holds. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you like and subscribe on YouTube. And if you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, make sure you rate us 5 stars. But without further ado, let's get right into it. And starting with the last player on our list, Justin Simmons, one of the best safeties in the league. He was the highest graded safety by PFF. He signed a franchise tender worth $11.5 million. And we think the Broncos will notch a deal with him pretty soon. Thoughts, guys?
Yeah, so just because he comes last in our list, that means we think that he is the most likely to return to his team next year, not like he's the last player. But I just kind of want to talk about Justin Simmons because there's a lot of reasons to think he will return to Denver next year. Being one of the best safeties in the league, the Broncos will not want to let him walk, especially in a secondary that's a little bit fragile, and it could get even more fragile with A.J. Boye and Kareem Jackson only getting older. And also, the Broncos look like a team on the rise, so we believe that Justin Simmons will want to stay and see if he can ride it out on that rise with the Broncos.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think with Justin Simmons, he's one of the most talented safeties in the league. I think we can all agree he's top 10, borderline top 7. And in my AFC West rankings, I had the Broncos safety duo as the best because I do like Kareem Jackson. While Juwan Thornhill is pretty good, I think Kareem Jackson and Justin Simmons have worked really well together, and I think they'll work really well together next year. And yeah, I think, Jack, you're right. A.J. Boye and Kareem Jackson are hitting the wrong side of 30. They're starting to get a bit older. So I think with this whole secondary, I think you need that anchor, you need that leader, and I think Justin Simmons can easily become that guy. I think I'm probably going to expect a 4-year deal to be done, somewhere around 10 per year, maybe even more, depending on how he does with the safety market. So I think we can all agree that he'll probably stay in Denver. They don't really have to pay a lot of their guys right now. I think Drew Lock is he's not going to hit a contract till a few years down the road. Same thing with Bradley Chubb. I think they can pick up his 5th-year option next year. So they've got time with him as well. So I think the Broncos aren't really in a lot of cap trouble. So they have time with Justin Simmons. I think he's a guy that they will probably lock up for the near future. And yeah, he's a great safety, 4 picks last year. I believe 15 passes defended. And just
he played every single snap on defense.
Yep. All around ball hawk and just a perfect safety for the Denver defense. Good replacement for, TJ Ward, Darian Stewart, long guys that have been there before. So I think he's a good replacement for them, and he's a franchise guy.
Mm-hmm. We can't see him in any other jersey. And moving on, next on our list, we have A.J. Green, wide receiver for the Bengals. And originally we had him higher up, but recently news broke out that he wants to play for 4 more years and preferably in Cincinnati. He wants to remain loyal to the franchise. Thoughts on that? That's why we put him second to last on our list. So just thoughts on A.J. Green?
Yeah, Jack, if you're cool with me going on it. I think A.J. Green's always been one of my favorite just personalities in the NFL. I don't know if you guys know this, but they did a 30 for 30 on his kind of upbringing, and he lost his brother early. Just had a stellar career after, and memory for him. So just a terrific guy. Obviously, he had the fight with Jalen Ramsey, but I don't hold that against him at all. A.J. Green's just a great receiver in general. I think last time we saw him on the field, I think we can all agree he was borderline top 5, definitely a top 6 or 7 receiver. Now I don't know where I would put him. I think Shrikar and I had our rankings for top 10 receivers in the AFC. He's still definitely a top 10 AFC receiver. I just can't put him in my top 10 right now overall. But still a great guy, 6'4" frame, just insane speed. You can take a slant to the house. He can take a deep ball as well. So I think last time we saw him, I believe he played 9 games. He had around 700 yards, 6 touchdowns, which is pretty solid. So I think a deal will get done with him. It just depends on how he works with Joe Burrow, I think. And I think it'll work just fine. I think the team will go around 5-11, 6-10. They'll win some games. They'll be the type of team that, can win any game, but also just they won't win a lot. But I think A.J. Green will be a big part of that offense next year, and I think it will be crucial for the development of even Tyler Boyd, who I can see potentially being a number 1 receiver. But I think if A.J. Green stays there, then you have the questions of Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins, even John Ross. I think John Ross is probably the guy that we're going to see go in a couple of years, maybe even next year.
Yeah, I think he's They didn't pick up his 5th year.
Yeah, they didn't pick up his 5th year option. I know that. So I think he's probably gone.
Watch the breakout and flame out video. It's on there.
Yeah. I mean, like, I think with AJ Green, it's just a great overall player. I know he's starting to get up there in age. I mean, it's crazy. Like 2011 was when he was drafted. It feels so long ago, but yeah, great receiver and not much else to say. I think he'll probably stay if he wants to.
Yeah, I think the reason that we had him a little bit higher up on the list, meaning we thought that he'd be more likely to leave, is just because, at least for me, I thought that by the end of the season, he might not even be the number 1 option on that Bengals team, because I'm a big fan of Tyler Boyd, and I think that with Joe Burrow, I think that Tyler Boyd could have become the number 1 option on that team. And so I thought that AJ Green might not want to be a part of the Bengals anymore, and he wanted to go somewhere he thought he could be a number 1 option. But after seeing what he said and wanting to stay loyal to Cincinnati, I mean, I trust his word, and I trust that he will stay loyal to the team that he's been with his whole career. And I hope he can still be productive, because like you said, the last time we saw him, just lights out at one of the top receivers in the league. And I really hope he can get back to that. But now that he's going to be playing on that franchise tag, all the weapons are in place for Joe Burrow to have a stellar rookie year, especially on offense, getting Jonah Williams back, having Joe Mixon, and then this receiver core, which is good. I think that all the pieces are in place for him to have a good.
I just wanted to throw out a quick note too. The last time we saw him, Bengals did have a winning record. They went 5-1 to start the year. The last time we saw him, so I mean, he was a big part of that. So I mean, could the Bengals do something? I don't want it to happen, but I think they could win some games. Like I think they're one of the teams that's really hard to predict. I mean, how is Joe Burrow going to do? How is this overall team going to do? How is this defense going to handle themselves? Which I think got a lot better over the offseason. We talked with Jared a couple weeks ago. So I think the Bengals are a really unpredictable team. But, I mean, if you got a guy in AJ Green as your number 1 receiver, I think you should be happy.
For sure. Definitely one of the more active off seasons we've seen from the Bengals in recent memory. I think they're just going to go as far as Burrow takes them. Moving on, next on our list, we have Anthony Harris, safety from the Minnesota Vikings. 6 picks, 11 passes defended to go with 35 solos. What do we think about Anthony Harris?
So, yeah, I think he's a great safety, a great ball hawk, obviously, with all the interceptions you see. And just the passes defended were insane last year. The only question for me is, will the Vikings have enough money to bring him back? I say they will. But it could be interesting if they want to go into maybe they miss the playoffs and they might want to go into a rebuild since they have to pay Dalvin Cook too. But I think that the reason that they let a lot of there was a lot of big contracts and people that they let walk, starters, especially on their defense, and the secondary got gutted and the cornerback room in general. I think that was so they could work out an extension with Dalvin Cook and bringing back Anthony Harris next year. Next year. It's the next free agency. So I think that's why they had to lose a lot of their starters on defense. So that's why I think we put him number 3 on this list.
Yeah, I think, Jack, you said it best. I think Anthony Harris is, I think in everyone's book, a top 15 safety. I think he's borderline top 10. I think it depends on your list, but I would definitely put him in the top 15. I know my friend Devin would get mad at me for not saying he's top 10, so I'll say he's borderline. But I think with Anthony Harris, the thing is with the Vikings, what you said, at least when I remember we were talking about this earlier. You said they gave up starters, right, because they were really bad in the cap. I think they're the only team in the negative area. So I think, yeah, they had to let go of guys like Everson Griffin, Linval Joseph, Alexander. I'm forgetting his first name. I think it's Marquise or something like that. Mackenzie Alexander. Mackenzie Alexander, Trey Waynes, I believe they let go. Xavier Rhodes also. Like, they let go of a lot of guys. Obviously, they still have their, like, true stars, Daniil Hunter, Eric Hendricks, Anthony Barr, Harrison Smith. And yes, they do have Anthony Harris, and I think they will pay him. They value him very high. I think I still remember some reports came out in March. They were trying to trade him for like a first-round pick with the Giants. They were really going after it with him. They value him very high. So I think Anthony Harris, obviously, he is a ball hawk. I think he works really well with Harrison Smith. They don't have Sendejo anymore. He's with us. But I think those two safeties can do really well together anyway. So I think with Anthony Harris, I expect the deal to get done. I don't know what the situation is with Dalvin Cook. I don't know how far it's going to stretch out. I think it really hasn't come up in the media a lot. I just know that Dalvin Cook is the contract has been a quote-unquote stalemate. So I think they'll probably get a deal done with Anthony Harris. But, I mean, to answer your point about the guys that they lost on defense, they addressed a lot of it in the draft. Yeah. Jeff Gladney to be one. That I like that pickup. So Troy Dye is another one I thought was very underrated. So they have a lot of pieces that they signed. I believe they got some guys on the edge as well, but I can't really recall right now. But yeah, I think Anthony Harris is someone they view as a key piece to their quote unquote rebuilding defense, I guess, but they still have their core. So I don't know what to call it. But I don't think they're going to look, even if they don't make the playoffs next year, I don't think they're going to rebuild just because they invested in Kirk Cousins for 2 more years. So they're kind of showing that, okay, now that Kirk Cousins has a playoff win under his belt, and it was a pretty good playoff win, I think maybe they're still invested. Okay, maybe there's still some kind of window here. If they can get a little bit better, I think this draft definitely helped them. So, but I think Anthony Harris is definitely a guy that they view as a key piece, and I think the deal will get done.
Do you view them as the best safety duo in the league, him and Harrison Smith?
Oh, that's tough. That's really tough. I off the top of my head, I really can't name one right now. I'm trying to think. I mean, the Jets, Marcus May and Jamal Adams. That's a really good one as well. I think people are.
I put Harrison Smith over them.
That's what I'm trying to think. Like, I like Marcus May. I mean, I think Jamal Adams is the best safety in the league right now in terms of a play and talent perspective. So, though I think Derwin James is not too far off. I think Jamal Adams should be one. So I think just off that, I can't give you an answer, Jack, but I think they're definitely a top 3, maybe top 2. I'm sure I can find a couple teams, but right now I can't really name you one.
I would put them. I'd put them over the Jets. I think I'd put them at 1 as my top safety duo in the league.
Okay. Yeah, I respect that. I can't really name anyone else.
I think Marcus May, I love Marcus May. I think he's a great player, but I think that Harris's production, I think there's a bigger gap between Harris's production and May's production and Adams and Smith. I think Adams is by far the most talented safety in the league and is crazy production. But Harrison Smith, I mean, he isn't far behind.
Oh, he's very – hey, remember the game we watched, the Packers-Vikings game?
Yeah,
remember we were watching it together. Dude was a stud. So I think if I can get more of run support from Anthony Harris, I think he's going to be an even better player. But just in terms of ball hawking ability, the dude's a stud. So, yeah, I think the Vikings will definitely want to keep him.
Mm-hmm. And moving on, number 5 on our list, we have Shaquille Barrett. Recently set the Bucs franchise record, previously set by Warren Sapp for the most sacks in a single season with 19.5, to go along with 58 tackles, 6 forced fumbles, 2 pass deflections, and 1 pick. And recently, the Bucs signed the 1-year tender. July 15th was the date. So what do we think about Shaquille Barrett? We put him pretty high up on our list. So just want to hear your thoughts.
I can kind of start off here. I think this was definitely an all-pro season. He kind of got snubbed, but I mean, there were just a lot of guys there. Chandler Jones, I believe, made it over him. So I think with Shaq Barrett, it's like, I mean, I looked at his stat. You said it's 6 forced fumbles, 19.5 sacks. That is incredible. And I really came onto this team.
19.
He came out of nowhere to me. He had 3 sacks the year ago. So this was something that was, I still remember a couple games of the year. I'm like, this dude is the sack leader. Like, that was just crazy to me. And he really did well for that Bucs defense. And I think this linebacking core is something to behold. I mean, Devin White, Lavonte David, Shaq Barrett, and the Bucs got playmakers all over. And again, I think I said this last episode too. The Bucs defense is very underrated. I think people just look at, the 32nd ranking that they got for pass defense and the first ranking that they got for run defense. They don't understand that they were on the field way too much, because Jameis Winston just threw a lot of picks. So,
and they were insane young.
Exactly. So, I mean, but that also can maybe explain some of the numbers that he had. But I think we can all agree he's still a really good player. Though I do want another good season out of him. That's why I think the Bucs were kind of unwilling to give him the kind of money that he was asking for. But I think he will follow it up. I don't expect him to have this type of year. I mean, if he does, that's really incredible. I would be shocked if he's not first team All-Pro if he repeats this. But I'm sure he'll get over double-digit sacks, maybe a couple forced fumbles here and there. So, I mean, he's a great player. I just think I need more consistency because, again, 3 sacks a year ago and then you burst on the scene with 19.5. There have been those one-year wonders before. I still remember Justin Houston went crazy. I think he had 22 sacks. And obviously, he's still a good player. He just hasn't been the same since. So there are always those one-year wonders, and I hope this isn't one of them. I think Shaq Barrett's immensely talented. I know he's pretty young. He got drafted in 2014, so he's got some time to get even better. But yeah, I think if I'm the Bucs franchise, I do want another year out of him, and this will be the year to prove it because you will be playing in a lot bigger games, a lot more's on the line, and if you can really make your mark on the defensive side of the football with Tom Brady as your quarterback in these big games, I think you're going to get yourself a 5-year deal.
Yeah, I think that's a little bit of the problem comes with money. Tampa Bay isn't the richest in cap size right now.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I think that they'll want him back and he'll want to stay. Just whether they'll be able to make a deal happen. Right now, we're banking on the fact that they will. And I think that after him, it kind of comes on our list to the kind of tipping point as where we believe they will be re-signed, where we think there's a little bit less of a chance. But I think that I would say Shaq Barrett will be re-signed if I had to put my money on it.
Yeah, same.
Mm-hmm. I'd agree with that. Moving on, we have Joe Tooney. I think we can all say one of the best offensive linemen in the league. 1 sack allowed. Anish was going over the stats prior to the game.
No penalties, bro.
No penalties.
No penalties?
That's insane.
Like, for an offensive lineman, that's
no penalties.
How?
16 games.
And
he played the second most offensive snap played, 0 penalties. Oh my God.
That's insane. And he signed the franchise tag back in March. So I know Anish is really ecstatic. So I'll let you start. But how do you feel about Joe Tooney?
I know Jack kind of said this is kind of the tipping point of the list. I think the Patriots will try everything they can to get him, just because I think now they're in a better cap situation than they would have been with obviously guys like Tom Brady, Rob Gronkowski, and the other guys that they have to let go of, right? Kyle Van Noy, Jamie Collins, those guys that I had to mention. And they still have their key pieces, Devin McCourty, Jason McCourty, J.C. Jackson, who we all Jack, you even brought it up, and you kind of educated me on that. I look more into it. That dude is a stud. So they've got their core pieces, Donta Hightower, etc. Cam Newton is now there as well. So I think with Joe Tooney, yeah, you got to protect Cam Newton. Like, Cam Newton really has never had a stellar offensive line. This will definitely be his best group, offensive line group that he's ever had. I mean, aside, I can name you all 5 of the guys: Isaiah Wynn, Joe Tooney, David Andrews, Shaq Mason, and Marcus Cannon. And that is very, I'm not a Patriots fan, but I can name you all 5 because I know each of them have had their moments. The Patriots offensive line is really good. And I think Joe Tooney is the best player on that offensive line. David Andrews got hurt last year. I would have said him, but yeah, Tooney was amazing. I mean, Trigo was alluding to it. Like, when I looked at his stats, I was just amazed. And I think with him, I think he has a chance to reset the guard market. So I think the Patriots will, if you want to keep him, you're going to have to pay him a steep price. But yeah, that being said, I think sorry, what? You said something?
Do you think he will reset the guard market?
Yes.
Yes, I think he will. I think if anyone's going to, it's going to be him. So, yeah, I think they. I mean, Jack, I don't know what your thoughts are on this, but I think they will pay him depending on how this year goes, because I still don't know if Cam Newton's a bridge quarterback or if he's there to stay. As much as I love him, I don't know. Also, I don't know how well the Patriots do. Let's say they don't make the playoffs. Maybe they just push the reset button. Let's say they go like 7-9, they push the reset button. It really depends. If they go 10-6, then maybe they keep Cam and they invest in Tooney and say, okay, let's try this again. We have Belichick. We have our defense. So it's really up in the air, but I think this is probably the last guy on this list where I would say, okay, I think he still would probably re-sign with the New England Patriots.
Yeah, I think the Patriots are a really weird team to talk about, because if I were to kind of try and put it into words, I say they're a team that's a contender every year, even though I think they're constantly in a rebuild. I think they're a team that's
honestly, though, that's a good way.
They're constantly moving through players and developing their backups and their depth pieces to take over eventually. So it just kind of seems like they're always in a rebuild, but always competing at the same time. So it's just, I think that they probably always have a way to replace people on offense, especially the offensive line. But at the same time, I think that while they do let some stars walk a little bit early and they don't pay them too early, I think that the offensive line is a place that they would try and maintain their guys. So if I had to say right now, I think they bring back Tooney, but it's an interesting free agency class next year where they have to bring back Donta Hightower, Jason McCourty. I believe a good amount of their running back room too is free agents. But I think that the Patriots will want to value their offensive line, especially a guard like Tooney.
I think Michelle, they picked up his 5th year, though.
Yeah, but I know that I think all of their backup running backs maybe are free agents next year.
I mean,
they always seem to reload on the big stars somehow and always seem to make it work. But I think the offensive line is a place that they won't really want to let Tooney walk. And if he has another season like he did last year, I think he's for sure going to stay in New England.
It's tough, though. Like, now that I'm thinking about it, it's just like, when is the last time you've heard the Patriots be the team to reset a market?
Yeah.
Like,
you just don't think about it like that.
That's where I'm thinking. Like, okay, I think if any guard will do it, it is him. It's just, will the Patriots be that team? I'm kind of on the fence about it, but I think if anyone's going to do it again, it's him. So that's what I'm banking on. It's just the player, not the organization, which I know is a weird bet, usually one that I don't make. I think if the more likely scenario would be that the Pats maybe trade him or while they still can.
Or tag him again, to be completely honest.
Yep, that's probably also another likely scenario. But yeah, I think with the Patriots, just like, can I imagine them reset? Like now with Tom Brady gone, it's just like I feel like everything's up in the air now. I mean, they are getting rid of players a year too early, like they usually do. I mean, they've done it with Chandler Jones. That's probably the biggest example. Brandon Cooks, another example I can think of.
Trey Flowers,
so, yep, Trey Flowers, another good one. So, really, I think it's all up in the air. But I think, again, I'll end it on this. If anyone's going to reset the market, it's a guy who allowed 1 sack and had 0 penalties in the second most offensive snaps in the entire NFL.
Yeah, I think that the Patriots are a hard team to predict, but they never really pay someone when they're not valuable, and they never want to pay anyone past their tip-top value. So I think that
exactly.
And I don't think Tooney will agree to a 2-3 year deal. He'll want us to be signed along for longer than that. But then again, the Patriots are also impossible to predict. One of the few teams in the league that just seemingly never do what the fans think they will. So,
but it works.
As of right now, I think that Tooney will be a Patriot in 2022, whether that's on a franchise tag or a extension. But it's possible that he's not.
Mm-hmm. And moving on to number 3 on our list, we have Bud Dupree, combined with TJ Watt, one of the best pass rushing duos in the NFL. And we look at the franchise tag that he signed on April 23rd. We have him at 3. So do we think he's going to leave? And if so, what money is he going to get?
This one I'm 50-50. Yeah, this one I'm really 50-50 on, because before last year, where I think Bud Dupree had a little bit of a breakout year, he's not really talked about too much. And so having a breakout year, you assume that people are going to talk about a lot more, but he's still in the shadow. He was always in the shadow of Cam Hayward. There's a lot of players on that Steelers defense that take the focus away from him. And I still think he is. I still think he's in Cam Hayward's shadow. Now Devin Bush is there. TJ Watt broke out. Minka Fitzpatrick. I mean, he's the 5th or 6th talked about Steelers defense.
Not talked about enough.
And I can see him, if say they don't make the playoffs, Big Ben maybe retires, or it's kind of obvious that he might not be able to lead that team back to the playoffs, and Bud Dupree is still overlooked on that Steelers defense. I think he might want to go somewhere where he's a number 1 pass rushing option and maybe one of the top defense players on the team, and also playing for a contender, because if the Steelers aren't going to be a contender, I don't know if he'll want to stay.
I think that's a perfect analysis. But the thing is, I don't even know if he's a top 5 pass rusher, like, let alone talked about guy. Like, the dude had 11.5 sacks, right? That was really good.
I was talking about the Steelers. Like top 5.
I know. Yeah. No, but that's what I'm saying, though. 4 forced fumbles, 11.5 sacks, but yet they have Stephon Tuitt, Cam Hayward, TJ Watt, Devin Bush. Those are all 4 really, really solid guys. Is like, where would I put Bud Dupree? It's like, I don't know. He broke out. It was a clear breakout year. He improved by 6 sacks. He had 3 more forced fumbles. But, I mean, you're going to have to pay TJ Watt. Devin Bush is a stud. I think he has so much more potential than people realize. I think that was a perfect trade that the Steelers did last year in the draft, picking him 10th overall. So it's really tough with Bud Dupree. It's just like, he's talented. He's a great guy. I mean, he seems like, I just don't see, like, I feel like he is the type of guy that wants to be the number 1 pass rusher on a team. So it's like with the Steelers, I have so many there, and you're going to have to invest in it, right? I mean, it's kind of like what the Niners had to do. They had to get rid of one in order to keep the other, right? What they did with Buckner, even though Buckner may be a little bit more talented now than Eric Armstead, right? They're banking on Armstead's future. Same thing with Bush and Dupree. Maybe they view Bush a little bit more, which I would too. I think Dupree is a bit more talented right now, but I think Bush's potential is just insane. So you have to bank on that. I think Bud Dupree is a guy that, it depends. I think you brought up the whole point about the Steelers contending or not. I think that's a great point. There's a lot of teams in the AFC, even in the NFC, that could use him. And I'm sure the Steelers could probably finesse like a 2nd-round pick, maybe even more, for Bud Dupree if they keep him around for next season. So maybe they tag him again. I really don't know. I think Bud Dupree, if I were to bet on it, I would say he plays for another team by 2022. I think we can agree on that maybe.
I think just the kind of question to ask yourself about this, have you ever heard an analyst of any kind talk about Bud Dupree a single time?
Honestly, last year I heard more of him being talked about than this year, and it's pretty I heard him talked about a lot
But
last
still, he's
year
not talked about enough.
When the Steelers were 7-2-1 last year, even though they had the AB drama, Bud Dupree was still talked about a lot on that defense, along with kind of TJ Watt's rise to fame. But now now I'm hearing a lot of Devin Bush, Cam Hayward, Fontuit. Hearing obviously TJ Watt is the main guy. So yeah, I didn't really hear about him not a lot last year, but it also has to be in part due to the Steelers going 8-8. I think that was another part of that.
But it must be demoralizing to see your play skyrocket and break out and somehow get talked about less.
Yeah, I think that was one of the biggest breakout seasons of 2019 and 2020. I think that was on the defensive side of the ball. I think that was probably one of the biggest.
Which is why he would want to make a name for himself on another team. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it just makes sense in that way. And moving on to number 2 on our list, we have Brandon Sheriff from Washington. They placed the franchise tag on him prior to the start of the new league year. He signed it in April. I think we could say he's one of the best guards in the NFL when he's healthy. Of course, health is the main issue. But what are our thoughts on Brandon Sheriff? Because we put him at 2, so we think he's going to leave. Just what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Sheriff is an interesting one because I would say that he would return to Washington if not for all this crazy stuff going on. I mean, obviously, we don't want to get too political, but all the stuff that's been happening with the Redskins organization, or so-called the Redskins organization, the Washington football team, I just think that there aren't going to be a whole lot of players that are going to want to return to that next year unless Ron Rivera can somehow salvage this kind of terrible situation going on right now. I'm not sure if I'm a player I'd want to return to Washington. And I think Sheriff wants to contend because he's been one of the top guards in the league most of his career. And I think I'd want to contend if I was him at least. And I have trouble seeing that a player might want to return to Washington after this craziness has gone on this offseason.
Yeah, obviously we won't go into detail about it, but the reputation of that organization just went all the way down. It's just,
I think I don't want to focus this episode on anything around that, but my thing with the Redskins is this, or whatever you want to call them, the Washington football team. I think, look, I mean, yes, it's what they've gotten themselves into is bad. It's not something that the NFL has faced in quite a while. So, but I think just for them at least, the positive is there's a multitude of things that they can do with the franchise. They can either move them, right? They can just make a new one, quote unquote, rebirth, I guess, of a franchise. We've seen that happen in many locations. Obviously, the one I know of is Cleveland. So this could happen, with DC. There can definitely be a rebirth of a franchise or a relocation. So there's a lot of stuff that they can do with the team. There's a lot of options here. Obviously, we don't know what's going on with Dan Snyder. I don't know what's going to come of him. But just with that in general, I mean, the team still has the players are still part of a team. There's still a Washington football team there, and they've got a lot of young pieces. Their defense is one that I can see taking a big leap next year. And you know what? It's a lot of banking is on the offense. I've seen a lot of people even have the Redskins ceiling as a winning season. So it really just depends on how the offense develops. I think I want to focus on the Washington football team, just their outlook rather than what's going on with their franchise. Sure. I think we should all do that right now. And I think if I'm Brandon Sheriff, yeah, there is some upside to this team, and you're right. There is also a downside to playing for the Washington football team. But yeah, he's someone who's been playing since 2015. I know he was a top 10 pick. He had a kind of down year last year, 11 games, 9 penalties, only allowed 1 sack. But again, not the best year from Sheriff that he's had. But still a 3-time Pro Bowler. He made the Pro Bowl last year. So I think with Sheriff, it's more of a question of does he want to contend? He hasn't really expressed any demanding trade, that type of.
You never hear him talk.
Yeah, exactly. He's one of those quiet guys. I feel like most offensive line are just like that. I haven't really seen one demand trades or stuff like that. I mean, you can, especially with guards and tackles. I mean, all of them really. So, I mean, it really depends. I mean, if a team gives him a mind-blowing offer, maybe he resets the market. I think it's between him and Tooney for going into next year. And Could the Washington football team or Redskins, whatever you want to call them, could they franchise tag him again? They could. I don't know the outlook of the franchise, but again, it is still a young team that has a lot of potential. So, but if I were to bet on it, I'd say that someone does give him a really good offer. Also, I believe Larry Warford isn't signed yet, so there's a lot of guards out there, and there are a lot of teams who need it. Bengals need a guard. I know the Browns do. There are a lot of teams out there. Cardinals could use a right guard. Like, a lot of teams out there that could use him, and the market is it's only going up for these guys. And I'm sure Sheriff, if he can cash in at a young team or a team with a lot of money, I'm sure he'll do that. So I think with Washington right now, they've got to focus on the outlook of their franchise rather than players like Sheriff. And I'm glad they at least kept him for another year. But for next year, I think he's probably going to cash in at another place.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. I just think that that someone will make him an offer he can't refuse, especially if it's from a better team than Washington. Just simple as that.
Mm-hmm. And at number 1 on our list, the player who we think out of all these franchise tag players, who's most likely to leave. And we put Dak Prescott in this spot. Obviously a good statistical year from Dak, but a disappointing year for the team as a whole. They placed the franchise tag on Dak worth $31.4 million. He signed the tender pretty recently in June. What are our thoughts on Dak Prescott and having him at number 1 on this list?
Okay, if I may. So Dakota Rain Prescott, around 5,000 yards, 30 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. I just wanted to make it clear that he's top 13. He should not be the same Madden rating as Wentz. So going off of that, I think
I could go on and on about those Madden ratings, but
I think going back to Dak Prescott, it's just my one knock on him. I mean, he's 1-2 in the playoffs. It's like he's still a young quarterback. He's done a lot for that franchise, really. I think he's kind of kept them relevant. Obviously, they didn't have a good 2000s decade. I think he's kept them back in it recently since 2016. The Cowboys are still – I know their fans go way too crazy and they're way overboard. But I mean, Dak Prescott is a solid quarter. He's definitely in my top 15 and top 13, actually. And it's just I haven't seen him do well without Ezekiel Elliott. That's just probably my one knock on him. Like, he's shown he can be clutch in some games. His rookie year was tremendous. I just haven't seen the same guy since the rookie year, just the same electrifying dude that I saw that year. Like, that was amazing.
And then when they went and got Amari Cooper, you saw that. But then
I saw a little bit, yeah.
And then this year, it just seemed like, I don't know. I feel like Dak Prescott, while he had those big numbers, like did he really like shine for you most of the year?
It's so weird because like they lost a lot of games that they should have won.
Yep.
I think that's probably what you kind of attested to. Like, again, the Bears game, that was just, you can blame the Cowboys defense, but it's like, that's a game you should win, in my opinion. Yeah, they beat teams like the Rams. They beat teams that they should have beat, but they also lost to teams that they should have beat. And the Eagles one, I think, was where I was like, what happened there? I mean, yes, I know there was some injury to your shoulder, but I mean, the Eagles were depleted, and like, you go in there and you were playing well, and then it was a weird season for the Dallas Cowboys going 8-8. I mean, you got a new coach now. And it just seems like all you could talk about with the Cowboys was Dak Prescott's contract. Because literally, started free agency, they locked up Amari Cooper, they locked up other guys, let go of Randall Cobb. They didn't do that much. They got McCarthy way early. So this was literally the only thing that was dragging on with them. And I think with Dak Prescott, it's just – here's what I'll say. I'll kind of end it off with this. I wouldn't say I guarantee it, but I'm 90% sure that Dak Prescott will be wearing a different jersey in 2022. That's what I'll get off of.
I agree. I mean, if you're Dak, you've watched the Cowboys extend Jalen Smith, Ezekiel Elliott, Amari Cooper, and now as the quarterback who you think they'd want to extend first, you're sitting here without a contract and you're playing on the franchise tag. I mean, you see the Titans going and extending Ryan Tannehill. Patrick Mahomes has got an extension, and like position player, like even other position players that aren't quarterbacks getting extended before you are. I just think there's a lot of drama building up in Dallas, and Dak Prescott has a reason to be upset. I think he has a valid reason to be upset with the Dallas ownership, and I don't think he will budge, but I also think Jerry Jones won't budge. So obviously we didn't mention it, but we saw what Dak Prescott's brother tweeted. So I think that in the Prescott family, there's obviously unrest and just being upset with the Dallas Cowboys. And that's why I think that he will be playing for another team next year.
I think also to add on to that, right? Obviously, his mom passed away. Condolences to his family. But like, still, even the media kind of brought it up. Like, the contract situation is just blown out of proportion. I mean, I think, well, I kind of looked it up, kind of looked at the history of this. Like, there were talks about a contract last year, beginning of last year. Jerry Jones said that it was imminent, which means it was bound to happen, right? He beats bad teams, but that's what Jerry Jones was banking on. They weren't the best teams, right? He went 3-0 against, I believe, the Giants, the Redskins, and the Dolphins, 3 of the top 5 picks. And when they go 3-0, people started to look at this team got a little bit too far ahead of themselves. Then they lost to teams like the Jets, which I know Jack was really happy about. But finishing 8-8, right? I mean, you lose kind of your quote unquote credibility. You give the leverage to the Cowboys front office, but also it's kind of like the same thing here where they kind of overpaid for their positional players. I think they overpaid for Jalen Smith. I think they overpaid for Ezekiel Elliott too.
And
as much as I like
Amari Cooper's deal was huge.
I think they overpaid for Amari Cooper as well. He is not the same as Michael Thomas. Their contract should not be the same. So I think they really overpaid for guys that I wouldn't say expendable, but you need a quarterback. And but I will also say this, I think Andy Dalton can still play. So they also brought in some leverage with him. So really, I thought a deal should have been done last year. I think it was really close to being done. And I think what really screwed Jerry Jones over was those games, because then Dak Prescott says, okay, look at how I'm doing. I had the best QBR those first 3 games. I deserve more money. So now it became a dollar.
He bet on himself and raised his price. But then I feel like by losing the games, he also lost some leverage in the situation.
So it goes – I think it went up and then it went down. I think it's like it's really hard to tell whether he gained leverage or lost it with this season. But one thing's for sure, knock on wood, but I mean, the dude is durable and the dude has constantly banked on himself. Think about it this way. He's made $4 million in his career as a quarterback so far. That is, I mean, and he's played since 2016, whereas Jared Goff's got a big deal. Carson Wentz has a big deal. Patrick Mahomes, 2017, big deal. Deshaun Watson, a deal is probably imminent as well. So, like, making $4 million with, I mean, and I can agree, like, top 13, he's done really well. And I think the 12 quarterbacks that I put above him, I think all of them have stellar deals. I think, all of them have big contracts. So, except Deshaun Watson, which, again, I think is eminent. But, I think he's still banking on himself here with no injuries to his resume. I think he had the one shoulder knock on him, but he's really been durable. So I think hopefully, knock on wood, he's durable next year. But like I said, I don't think he's going to play for the Cowboys in 2022.
Yeah, I think they try and make it seem like they're setting him up for the future and trying to give him all these weapons. But it really just looks like they're loading up the team for a possibility of him not being on it next year.
When he leaves.
I mean, whatever quarterback comes into that system will excel. I mean, with those receivers, with the offensive line and the coaching and Ezekiel Elliott, they will excel. And I think any quarterback could put up 4,000 yards and 25 plus touchdowns in that offense. And so they might not even need Dak Prescott to fill that role, but I think that he wants to be a Cowboy. It's just, I don't know if they're going to be able to work out a deal that will make both sides happy, because it seemingly Jerry Jones is never happy unless he is ripping someone off, it seems like. So
I wanted to kind of quickly add on to that too. I think, again, with Andy Dalton's case, Alex Van Pelt worked with Aaron Rodgers and Andy Dalton under Mike McCarthy, and he did similar footworks with both of them. So, look, Andy Dalton is not a bad quarterback, right?
He's serviceable.
That's a perfect word. And I've seen flashes of him having an MVP-like year. Obviously, that was in 2015, but still, I've seen him do well. He didn't do that bad last year either. So I think it's just Dak Prescott is definitely better, though. He's shown really good flashes throughout his 4 years. He's got a lot of talent. It's just a question of how much money is he willing to settle for, and how has this bad blood that's spurred carry out? I think that is really the question. But I think we can all agree here. I think it's looking worse and worse in terms of him coming back to the team.
Mm-hmm.
And I think by 2022, there will be some teams looking for quarterbacks. Like, I'm sure maybe Teddy Bridgewater is not going to be a Carolina Panther anymore. That's just one option. Maybe they go draft one.
I mean, there's a lot of teams that could.
There's a lot of teams like that. So, it's all up in the air right now. But yeah, again, finish it off. I'm like 95% sure he's wearing a different jersey in 2 years.
Yeah, if he can win games, he's got a little bit more leverage. But statistical seasons, I think, on the Dallas Cowboys aren't going to be enough with that offense that he has.
Nope.
He's got to win games. And I think if he does not win the division this year, I'm not really sure he'll be playing. I think if he wins the division, I'll change my mind a little bit and say maybe he returns to the Cowboys. But if he doesn't win a division, I mean, I think he's gone.
I think it's just ironic too because Zeke, Amari Cooper were banking on not wins but stats. Like that's what they had. Cooper came in, really revitalized that team. They went 10-6 and won a playoff game. I mean, and he used that. I mean, even last year he didn't have the best year. He terrible in road games, and he still got a 5-year, $100 million contract. Ezekiel Elliott had the whole 6-game suspension and still amassed 6 years, 90. So really weird kind of thing down there in Dallas, but. Yeah, I think we've said it perfectly. I don't expect him to be with them.
Well, let us know what you think in the comments. What would you change about this list? Who's your number one? But we thank you guys for watching this episode. As we said before, make sure you like and subscribe if you like the video, and hit the bell if you want to be notified of our future episodes. And also, if you're on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, make sure you rate us 5 stars. But we thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time.